Hello Power Rangers fans and welcome back to Toku Topics. Today, Super 7 Ultimates week on the channel continues with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Yellow Ranger figure from the Super 7 Ultimates line. So before we get started here, I have to give a huge thanks to Super 7 for sending this figure over for the purposes of this review. So if you have already checked out the other review I've done of the Mighty Morphin Green Ranger, this is sort of the second figure in the wave. I mean, it doesn't really matter which figure is which in the wave here. But as you can see, we have the Yellow Ranger in the cardboard box that these come in, ages 14 plus by Super 7. And it's just a nice cardboard box. It's nothing too fancy or anything like that. On the back, it just has a bunch of like safety hazard, choking hazard stuff, licensed by Hasbro, the barcode, the Super 7 logo, all of that kind of stuff there. And it says that it comes with one figure with accessories, which is certainly the case here. So, if I can open the box, there we go. So I have already taken the plastic wrap off of this, which is what all of these figures had. But let's go ahead and slide it out of the box. Probably making a lot of noise for the edit. And there is the Yellow Ranger box. And just like the Green Ranger one, I think these boxes are really pretty with that kind of green sort of lightning look that is very reminiscent to the original Bandai retro packaging from the 90s for Mighty Morphin. I think that's an absolutely great touch. You have the power coin symbol here of the saber-toothed tiger. It's kind of raised, and as you can see, it's very shiny with all the chrome and stuff on it. Very nice. You have Yellow Ranger down there, Super 7, ages 14 plus. On the side, it just kind of continues that pattern on both of these sides, and then on the back it just has the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers logo. Same thing with the one figure with accessories and by Super 7. And then on the bottom it just has the barcode, and very similar to all the stuff that was on the back of the cardboard box. And then there is the Ultimates logo right there. So for the first member of the core team that they've released in Ultimates, and I think it's really cool that they started with green and yellow. They have already announced at the time of this video the entire core 6 members of the team spread across the waves 1, 2, and 3 of the Ultimates, but this was the first of the core team that they've done. And I feel like a lot of times when they do, or like when figure lines do Mighty Morphin and they kind of do like the female figures first or whatever, or whenever they start with those, they usually start with pink. So I think it's really cool to get yellow here at the beginning. And let's take a look at what we have. And there it is. So as you can see, tons of accessories here. If you checked out the Green Ranger video, you probably know a little bit of what to expect here because you have very similar accessories in terms of recreating retro like action figures from the flip heads from the 90s and stuff like that. But all of the different deep cut references that Super 7 is able to put into these figures is super cool, and I absolutely love that. But there is the Yellow Ranger, and this obviously is their female body mold, and then you have a ton of swappable hands. You get the Blade Blaster and Power Daggers that look like the original flip head release. You get Mr. Tickle Sneezer, which is really cool. You get an open Power Morpher. You get these flowers that were used in a specific episode, which we'll take a look at all this in detail in a second when I open it. You get all 3 versions of the Blade Blaster, and instead of having it like have any kind of mechanisms to transform, you just get all 3 versions. Very nicely painted, so you get the holstered, the blaster, and the blade. Of course, you get the Power Daggers, you get the actual little crystal that they use to kind of summon the Zords. And then, like I showed off already, the Trini and Aisha heads. So we have a lot to go over with this figure. Of course, we're going to compare it to the Lightning Collection version as well, so we'll take a look at that. So obviously, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Yellow Ranger, ages 14 plus, Super 7. And then you get these Power Rangers lightning bolts on the side, which look very nice. And on the back, you just get this kind of, not really a render, it's like a nice suit picture of the Yellow Ranger. And you get this little bio here, which we will go ahead and read. The Yellow Ranger is an essential member of the Power Rangers, never one to shy away from facing fears, especially when a fellow Ranger is in trouble, or when her doll magically comes alive. Trini Kwan was the first chosen for the mantle of the Yellow Ranger, later transferring her powers to Aisha Campbell before leaving for the World Peace Summit. The Yellow Ranger calls upon the power of the saber-toothed tiger to utilize her strength, agility, and armor-piercing power daggers to defeat the evil forces of Rita Repulsa. I really like the bios on the back of these. I think they're pretty nice. The whole box presentation is just really pretty. I love everything that they've put into this. So let's go ahead and open up the Yellow Ranger figure and take a look at what she has to offer. Okay, so here's the Yellow Ranger out of the box with all of the accessories here, and you still get a ton of stuff with this, just like the Green Ranger figure here. And in that regard, this figure is just fantastic. The figure itself is also, of course, very good as well. I have a little bit of some issues with it and just some of the design things with it. And I definitely think that kind of overall, I might like green more Then again, that could just be sort of a bias towards that mold, or maybe just obviously a bias towards that suit or character. But let's go ahead and take a look here at the Super 7 Ultimates Yellow Ranger, if she wants to focus, which I don't know why she isn't. There we go. So this figure does look very good. I kind of pointed this out on the Green Ranger one as well, and we'll zoom in. The morpher detailing on these is really good. I will say the tiger, or the saber-tooth tiger, doesn't look like it's as defined on there. Like, you can see some little like ridges and stuff, like, so there is certainly an attempt for it there. But I do love the Power Ranger thing there. You do get the black lines around the Blade Blaster holster and the belt buckle. The actual diamonds and everything look very clean. Everything is applied very cleanly and everything with the paint. You do get the bottom of the boots painted. And overall, it's very nice. However, I will say, something looks off about the helmet to me. And I don't know specifically what it is. I feel like it's a little too squished in this way. And I will say, when I compare it with the Lightning Collection version later on in this video, in that regard, I'm probably going to pick the Lightning Collection version for the helmet sculpt overall, while the Green Ranger one, the Lightning Collection one, was definitely inferior to the Super 7 one. The Super 7 one got it like perfectly. But this one, I don't know. I just feel like it's a little squished. Like, it's too up and down tall and not like left to right like thickness, if that makes any sense. But still, overall, the figure is very good, articulation wise, and of course, like, the detail and everything, the paint on here is perfect with the tusks and the mouth and the eyes. But articulation, you do get sort of a ball joint. It doesn't really want to move left to right or anything. However, it is quite easy to pop off for the head swaps, which I definitely appreciate. Unlike Lightning Collection ones, I really don't feel like I'm going to break these joints, even though it's very similar style to kind of this, I guess it's a dumbbell joint or kind of hinge joint, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be as prone to snapping or anything like that. And on all of these, it does kind of, I don't feel like it's intentional, but the inside kind of looks like it's a skin tone almost, so it's, I don't know if that's an intentional thing to kind of pretend like there's a helmet in there, or a head in there, but it's one of those things where, I don't know, it's kind of a neat little detail that's not, I don't know if it's intentional, it's probably not, just kind of something that I noticed. But articulation-wise, besides the head, you kind of get a rotation there, and that's one thing that's kind of weird, as you just saw. This joint is a ball joint, and the figure separates very easily there, at least mine does. So, in theory, that should be a joint that can rotate this way, but every time you try to rotate it, it kind of, because of the divots there, just her chest, it's going to go over that bump and unpeg. So, like, it's mainly there for this kind of movement, but overall, I don't think it's terrible movement there, and you can get her kind of that far back or forward, and it's not too terrible. Here you can rotate this there, and of course you can bend the arms out, which they are always a little tricky to kind of flow back in, and you can rotate it 360 there. You get a single jointed elbow, and the wrists or the hands have the little hinge joint there and can of course rotate all the way around. Down here on the legs, you can rotate them there slightly. You can move them up and back and out. And then they have single jointed knees as well. And they can rotate at the boots. Actually right there, I think this one's rotating at the knee, but I thought you could rotate it at the boots. Okay, but that was just Green Ranger then, because yeah, Green Ranger rotated at the boots and not the knee joint, while Yellow rotates at the knee joint. So that's a little bit different. And then you do get a hinge there on the foot. So, not like 100% of like the greatest articulation. I think the only thing that I really think is a downside in terms of articulation is I wish that they had double jointed elbows and knees. But besides that, you get every kind of pose ranged out of this that I would want out of articulation. So in that regard, I think it's perfectly good. So that is the Yellow Ranger figure kind of in the basics, but obviously we have a ton of accessories to take a look at here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the civilian heads. So you do get a Trini, which I think looks really good actually. I think compared to the Tommy likenesses, this one does really look like Tui Train to me. Like, I think they did a pretty good job capturing the Trini likeness, and I will compare them to the Lightning Collection versions. So let's go ahead and pop that helmet off, and there goes the entire torso joint again. So just pop that right back in there. And then let's see how difficult this is going to be because of the hair. Okay, yeah, not too bad at all. That was relatively easy. So there is Trini's head sculpt there compared to the character. And I see it. I definitely do see a likeness in there. It's pretty solid. I think honestly Hasbro and Super 7 both got this very good for her. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the Lightning Collection version so we can compare the two real quick. So here is Lightning versus Ultimates, and I don't know, it's kind of tricky. As you can see here, I don't have the Lightning Collection one actually down on the joint because the Yellow Rangers in the Lightning Collection, the Mighty Morphin body, is very prone to having that neck joint snap. So I have two Yellow Ranger Lightning Collection figures, one that I don't swap heads on to just have the helmet, and one that I just rest heads on for the joint like this kind of thing. So in that regard, this figure obviously wins because I can actually swap the joint and not make me feel like I'm going to break it, so that's definitely a plus. But honestly, looking at the likenesses, I don't know, it's tricky for me to pick which one I think looks better. Because the Lightning Collection one I think looks very good as well. But I like kind of like the more color in her face that this one has with like, the cheeks and everything. So I think they're both really good likenesses, but I might be leaning more towards the Ultimates for Trini, but the Lightning Collection one here was still very good. One of the best, especially for this being an early on Lightning Collection figure within the first 25 figures. I think actually Mighty Morphin Yellow was figure number 25, if I remember correctly, with reveal order. So yeah, for this one, I'm going to give it a slight win to Super 7, but it's a very close contest on this one. I think both companies did a very good job with the Trini head sculpt. So of course we get an Aisha head sculpt as well, which I think is really cool that they gave you both of them. I mean, for the $55 price point that these have, you would come to expect that, I would hope. Obviously Lightning Collection sold Yellow Ranger at least twice, 3 times, honestly. Actually, we're about to get it for the 4th time, to give us a bunch of different variant head sculpts for Trini and Aisha. But for here, you get both of them, which I think is really nice. Here's a comparison to Kara and Ashley, and I definitely do see it in there from her, 90s look, her 90s era there. I love the little headband or scrunchie thing or hair tie or whatever this is supposed to be. I don't know anything about hair, but I think it looks good. She has her little earrings and stuff there. And yeah, it's pretty solid. I don't think it's as good as Trini's, and we're going to compare the Lightning Collection version between the two Aisha head sculpts in a second here, but it's not too terrible. And here's the Lightning Collection versus Ultimates comparison for this head sculpt. This one I have to give to Lightning. I don't think this one is terrible by any means. The expression is kind of weird to me, and something looks off about this Aisha to me, and I can't necessarily nail what it is besides the facial expression. I almost feel like her face looks like a little more too round than it should be or something. I don't know if that makes any sense, but we've had 2 Aisha head sculpts for the Lightning Collection, and this is kind of the one that matches the most to the same kind of Season 2 era kind of hair. But yeah, I definitely think that, this isn't even my favorite Aisha head sculpt. I personally prefer the metallic armor one that they released for the Season 3 head sculpt, the longer hair. But this is still not a terrible head sculpt, and as you can see, obviously, since I can't put the head on there perfectly, it's just kind of sitting on the joint and looks ridiculous. But neck joint aside, I think that this is definitely the winner in that regard. But it's not terrible. I do see Aisha in there, and I think she's going to look really nice next to a Super 7 with Rocky and Adam when they release those figures in the next couple of waves. But in this case, I'm going to give it to Lightning Collection. So Lightning Collection wins 1, and Super 7 Ultimates wins 1 with the head sculpts. So I think that's pretty fair. And now we have a ton of accessories to dive into here, so I'm going to go ahead and start with this very tiny one. Just like the Green Ranger had, which is still super cool, you get an opened Power Morpher. So here you can still see the coin, there was an attempt on there as well. You can kind of make out the general shape of the Sabertooth Tiger, I would say. And you get the power bolts there, which obviously are applied kind of sloppily, especially this one down in the left corner, but for how tiny it is, you can't expect absolute perfection on these because they're only going to get as good as they can get, because this thing is tiny, but I really do like it. You kind of get a hand specifically meant for kind of gripping it. There's tons of different hands we're going to take a look at here, but you can kind of recreate the morph pose, and it's never really made a complete sense for morphed Rangers to come with Power Morphers, because the Lightning Collection remastered ones are doing the same thing, but it's still a cool inclusion nonetheless, even if it doesn't technically make sense. But speaking of hands here, obviously out of the box you get just 2 open hands, so you kind of get this more not as opened hand. I guess they are. I was going to say this one looks a little bit more open, but they are the same opened hand. Here we have a split open hand kind of thing for her right hand, and then you also get kind of a blast kind of hand. I think this is more for holding a blade blaster in its blaster mode. You get this kind of, not really a claw hand, but this kind of gripping kind of hand. You get, I almost dropped that one. That was almost the Toku Topics drop of the episode. You get a different kind of holding hand, which I think this one maybe is a little bit more for the daggers, possibly. You get that kind of opposite. Pretty much every set of hands has their corresponding opposites. It's kind of more clenched in fist hand for the right hand. You get just a general fist, and then there's another general fist right here. And then you get another split open hand. And then there is a kind of karate chop-ish hand, and then another opened kind of hand. So, very similar kind of hands for everybody, so it all matches. Now, accessories-wise, we'll go ahead and start with the Blade Blaster. So you do get, or weapons-wise, I should say. So here is the Blade Blaster, sculpted and painted beautifully, down to, and it's not really, let's try to zoom in on it, down to the Power Rangers written on there. So even though technically it should say Jew-Ranger, I suppose, but I mean, of course I would say Power Rangers for the purposes of these. But it looks great. I mean, you get the black lines, or the little black shapes, you get the blue lines, like, it's sculpted and painted perfectly. I have absolutely no complaints with that, and all three versions are the same kind of praise that I can give it there. So you get the holstered version, which I'll put onto the figure in a second. And then you get the not used very often at all, but you do get the blade version down to the little red paint on the lines there, on the little blades. So very, very nice attention to detail there. And of course you have a Blade Blaster holster, so you can take your Blade Blaster and holster it in there, and it looks perfect. Like, I think it's, sometimes, when we get holstered Blade Blasters with Mighty Morphin figures, they kind of look a little too big, or they look a little too small. This one I think is perfect. Maybe it could have gone a little taller to kind of cover a little bit more of this up, but I have no complaints with that. And maybe it's a little thin, but besides that, I think it's perfectly good. I know I kind of said it was perfect and then kind of gave like two little sort of complaints about it, but honestly, I think it's perfectly fine. It's exactly what I would kind of want it to be. So we can just kind of put her back there with that. Yeah, you can see how wobbly that joint is there. And then, of course, weapon-wise, you can't have the Yellow Ranger without the power daggers, which are sculpted and painted once again very beautifully, down to like the tiny little sort of not like curve, but kind of bend that the little sides little dagger pieces have. And those are actually kind of sharp, like genuinely, so be careful with them. Also, you don't want to snap them or anything, obviously, but yeah. And then there's the bottom. So I'm not sure if we're going to get a Power Blaster or if we can combine these into the Power Blaster. There's no like combined Power Blaster in any of the accessories photos from any of the figures from these waves as far as I can remember, but I'm not sure how close or if these actually will be able to combine. I assume probably, because most power weapon releases in figures can. Speaking of power weapons, of course, as well, as part of that whole retro flip head recreation kind of thing, you get all silver all silver power daggers, which is a really, really cool touch. And these have those kind of pegs that the original Bandai ones did as well, and those could connect into into a Power Blaster. So I think that would be a very cool detail if that is going to be a possible thing. But I kind of like these all silver daggers. Like, they kind of look ridiculous, and obviously they're not like, they back then for Bandai they didn't give them much accurate sculpting, kind of just the general shape of a dagger. But nonetheless, I think that's pretty cool. And then to go with that, you have an all white bladed, or all white blaster mode of the Blade Blaster, which also has that hand peg there, which none of these have pegs in the hands. You can just slap them into their hands, but great attention to detail to have that peg in the hand there, or have that peg for the hand, which I absolutely love. And you can, of course, if you want to, take this version of the Blade Blaster and holster it in there as well, which is just a really cool detail. One of those fun things to wear as a fan and collector of Power Rangers toys, kind of being one of my main interests with the franchise. That kind of thing to recreate an old, iconic, classic Power Rangers figure is a perfect little detail for me that I just absolutely love. And then the kind of final things to take a look at here are kind of the extra things that Super 7 just went above and beyond on to include. And that is the Saber-Tooth Tiger Power Crystal, which is so tiny it doesn't really want to focus. But it does have the coin molded on there for the best that I could hopefully show that. There it is. It's actually the best thing I think the coin is sculpted on. We just kind of get this nice translucent yellow plastic. And that's really, really cool for something that's really not seen too often at all. And then here you get the Deandra flowers, used in the episode The Trouble of Shell Shock, that they used to kind of stop his freezing spell. They used these flowers, which I think is just a really cool touch. And then the final accessory is Mr. Tickle Sneezer, which is, I love this guy. Look how fun he is. And he's painted very nicely. I gotta say, I don't think we've ever had a Mr. Tickle Sneezer anything ever. So as far as I know, maybe there's some really weird, obscure Bandai thing, but I don't think they ever released him like in their Evil Space Aliens line or anything like that, because why would they, I guess, necessarily? But this is a great inclusion. I love that this is here. So it's so fun. So there's that. He can't stand on his own or anything like that. Let me kind of try. Yeah, that's not going to work, but it's still perfect little fun thing to have there. So this is great. This is definitely a great figure. I think overall, and we'll kind of compare it here with the Green Ranger, so you can kind of just get a height comparison. They are still both 7-inch figures, but here are the two Rangers that we have so far. And these are the only Rangers in Wave 1 of the Ultimates, because the rest of the wave is Zords and Villains, because you kind of get the whole span of what Super 7 is going to be doing with these waves. Rangers, Villains, and Zords. Each wave has followed that kind of pattern so far. So here you just get 2 members of the team. Each wave so far has 2 members of the core team, and I think that these are a great, inclusion to have. Everybody loves Tommy. He's an iconic Ranger, and it makes sense to start with him, because pretty much you have to start with green or red, and I think green was a perfect choice here. And then for the female figures, you could have started with pink or yellow, and of course, maybe some people would have wanted pink on the wave to go with Tommy, but I still think that Trini/Aisha was a fantastic choice to start here, and I think both these figures are very, very good, even if I do have to say I think green turned out a little bit better than yellow, just because of kind of the helmets and some of the things with like that joint and some of the heads looking a little strange. But then again, I think all the heads kind of look a little strange, but for the most part, these figures are excellent, and the entire team, or having the entire team of them, I think is going to look very, very good. So before we wrap it up here, I definitely want to go ahead and show off the full-on comparison between the Yellow Ranger figure from Super 7 and the Lightning Collection, because we only showed off the head sculpt comparisons so far. So here is Super 7 Ultimates versus Power Rangers Hasbro Lightning Collection, and yeah, I mean, they're both really good figures. Trying to think which one I like the female body mold overall for. Probably this one, because I really do like this rotation joint that this one just doesn't really have, because it likes to keep popping off. But however, I will say, just in terms of figure like integrity, the single joints on here and the neck joint feels infinitely more sturdier and easier to pose and less scary of breakage on the Ultimates figure compared to the Lightning Collection. Because I've seen tons of different people neck joints on the female figures break. I've had single jointed elbows on Lightning Collection break, and I try to be as careful as possible with these figures, as you know, because I mean, I love these figures. Lightning Collection is my main thing ever. So, and of course, since these figures are so costly and everything, and I want to do really good jobs with these videos, I'm trying to be careful with them as well, of course. So for that to, have a breakage on, not this one in particular, but this kind of joint, but this one making it feel a lot less scary, I definitely appreciate. But I do say that I still think that the helmet is a lot better on the Lightning Collection version, and it just doesn't really want to compare. But I just think that this one has the kind of proportions better. Like I said, this one just feels more squished in. This one, to me, honestly, kind of looks like, if anybody remembers, there was that leaked trailer concept for this animated Power Rangers thing that never happened back in 2013. And the Yellow Ranger and Knack, and they all had a very cartoony look. And that kind of helmet sort of makes me think of that, just because of kind of how squished in it is. So for this one, I will say that the helmet wins on Lightning Collection for me, but probably overall figure, and of course accessories. But accessories, I mean, it's not even a fair comparison at all, because you have a $25 versus a $55 figure. But I think that overall, this figure is probably still going to win as my favorite. However, there's a lot here that I like that is just not going to be present with this one whatsoever. But both are good for different reasons, which is kind of what you'll say about every single one of these. And it's nice that the entire first wave of these Ultimates figures have some sort of Lightning Collection comparison, which not every wave can say that. Most waves can, but Super 7 is kind of doing more different things the deeper that they get into the waves compared to Lightning Collection. So both have their merits, both have their downsides, and that's kind of how each of these are going to be. And it kind of just depends on which one you want to get. And that is going to do it for my figure review of the Super 7 Ultimates Wave 1 Mighty Morphin Yellow Ranger. So, like I said numerous times in this video, I definitely can recommend this figure. I can recommend all of these figures, even though they have a very hefty price tag. I think it's one of those things to where if it's a character you really, really like, or if it's a suit you really, really like, you're probably going to be happy with this figure. It's not the most articulated thing in the world, but you can still get some pretty solid poses, as I'm probably trying to show up on the screen right now. But really, Super 7, my favorite thing that they have is the accessories. I love deep cut accessories like Mr. Tickle Sneezer. I love the recreation of the Bandai retro flip head figures from the 90s. And that's just a really cool thing. I think that they bring a lot of new stuff to the table compared to Lightning Collection, but they are, of course, very pricey. However, they're probably as the name implies, the ultimate figure of Mighty Morphin that you can get. You get both character options for the Yellow Ranger. You get pretty much any kind of accessory you would think of. and a lot of stuff that never gets released anywhere else. So I can recommend this figure, and let me know down in the comments below, do you have this figure from Super 7? Did you get any of the Ultimates figures? And which figures would you like to see them do in this line? And what do you just kind of think of it so far, as this is the first wave to finally release after a very long pre-order window. So until next time, you guys can follow me on Twitter at LivingRangerKey or LightningFigPR. Huge thanks once again to Super 7 for sending this figure over and the whole wave over for all of these different videos. Be sure to check out MMPR Green, already up on the channel right now, and the other 3 are coming up after this, or if you're watching this sometime in the future, all 5 of them are up on the channel right now. So until then, I will see you all later. To wrap up this video, I'd like to thank my $5 and above patrons: Jurassic Samurai, Maggot Alchemist, Robert Browning, Static Thunder, Brendan Overland, Maji Yellow, Redstone MCPC, Comics 1017, James Darty, Monster Rocket, John Luke, Eric Berry, Tyler Bazetsky, Matthew Thorne, Josh Landry, and Pyramidus. You can support Toku Topics for as little as $1 a month on my Patreon, link in the description below.